might trigger some questions for you.
Thank you.
They have different bills that passed this year, not necessarily bills that we put in, but that passed. So it might help you a little bit. Please feel free. Anybody else?
These are all the bills that passed, or the major ones?
The major ones.
Okay.
No, I think we had, I want to say we had over 200.
Yeah, I would
The
imagine.
major ones, yeah. Yeah, anybody else?
So many.
Yeah, I just got started, and I encourage you to come up and get a form. So we can get started with, I'll just give you a little background about the session. This past session was the short session. We started the first week of February and ended the first week in May. So this is like a wrap up after the session for you. If you have any questions with regard to bills that may have passed, bills that you would like to see in the future, any question that you have at all, we're really here for you to answer questions. Representative Dubitsky might want to say something. Did you want to say something?
Hi, thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Hi, good evening. I'm Senator Summers, and I am here really to listen to you all. You know, I don't want to talk at you. I want you to let me know what your concerns are, your questions. This packet that you may have lists all the, not all the public acts, but sort of the majority of them by section. Just because they're in here does not mean that us three up here supported it. This is what passed. And if you have any questions, they try to put together sort of the largest bills out of those areas, but there's additional bills that pass that are not in this packet. So if there's anything particular of your interest, we can certainly talk about that also.
Does anybody have any questions that they're to start with? Let's just make sure, because we can just talk in general. Yes.
I do read right off the bat, if you look on page 24, number 1, with your veterans and military affairs. I brought it up at the last town hall about almost 2 weeks ago in Plainfield with our state reps and everything. I myself, I work for the Soldier Sales Grade Fund. I handle the Northern and Canadian offices. Okay? And I'm aware that I have won, and the proceeds from that will come from the Soldier Sales Grade Fund. The problem I have, which I have no problem with that whatsoever. The problem I do have is the state of Connecticut, the fact that says how they're taking care of all the veterans and their families here in the great state of Connecticut. But in reality, they're not. Because even when you sit back and look at it, even with our system for the Soldier Sales Grade Fund, it's wartime service. That's the stipulation in there, it's wartime service. So even if they're not changing the state statute, which I've been trying to get them to do, to marry more up with the federal definition of a veteran, where you're looking at the honorable service there. All I'm asking, really, in reality, if you really want to take care of the veterans and their families, is to turn around and, with state statute section 27-103, which falls under the Soldier Sales Grade Fund, you look at item 3, and the very first thing on there is service in time of war. If you turn around, if you exclude that and maintain 90 days or more of cumulative service and honorable service, period. Drop everything else. You don't need the other 2/3 of a page in there. What's the statute? What's the statute number?
27-103. I'm not looking to change the overall state definition for a veteran. I'm asking for a change in the state statute pertaining to the Soldier Sales Marine Fund. Because when you think about it, you all are involved with the health here in the state of Connecticut. Am I correct with your committee?
I'm having a really hard time hearing you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're all involved with health, correct?
Well, we're both on public health.
Yeah.
Representative Dubitsky.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Democare has an awful lot to do with the well-being of an individual, as we all know, okay? And if you truly want to take care of the more veterans in the state of Connecticut, not all veterans are wartime era. I myself, I served during 9/11, but I was never deployed. I remained at Valdosta, Georgia, at Woody Air Force Base. So I would not be eligible because I did not receive the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal. So you have a lot of other veterans that served peacetime or served during conflict times do not have the right dates to qualify as a wartime by definition. So I'm asking the state to reconsider and look at opening that up. defining it more with the federal government. I'm not looking for the overall definition with the DBA.
Okay, I
Right,
can tell
that's
you
it.
that
You
that's
see what I'm
something
saying?
that we certainly can put in as a bill. I know for a fact, because I'm the head of appropriations, what they're gonna look at is how many veterans there are. They'll calculate how much this is gonna cost the state of Connecticut.
It's not going to cost anything because the way the bill was written up, which I have a copy of the bill, the Soldier Sales Marine Fund is footing the bill for the dental care.
And where does that come from?
The Soldier Sales Marine Fund has been handling the fund for the state of Connecticut since 1919 when the fund first started.
I don't know where that fund comes from, like where the funding comes for that fund.
Oh, the fund, when our soldiers were returning home from the war back in 1919, the state wanted to give them a small stipend to thank them for their service. I can go on and on with the history.
I can look up the history, I just am not familiar with that fund, so I'd have to take a look at what's in the fund, how.
There's about 73 million in the fund right now.
And that's state, not federal.
That's not, well, the American Legion has been handling it for the state since 1919.
Okay, I think this is gonna be like a longer conversation that we can meet with you after and go over it, if that's possible. For us to introduce a bill, we'll have to know more information, and we can look legislatively to see if it's ever been tried to take the wartime service portion out. I know specifically they did that for property taxes, et cetera, because the bill gets way too big if they include.
Well, as I said,
everything.
I'm not looking at the overall state statute, I'm looking at the statute that pertains to the Soldier Sales Marine Fund and the dental care.
Okay.
Because you're sitting back and saying that you want to be able to take care of the veterans. We have also turned around, and we just changed it this year here too. Now, we also included the spouse now.
Yes.
We will give the dental care to the spouse as well, not the children, but we'll give to the veteran and the spouse.
Can you make sure we have your name and contact info?
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
you're not actually asking to change 27-103?
Yeah,
Right
right here.
You must take the war.
You guys can have it. Trust me, I got plenty of
I'm
copies.
looking at it right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking, right there, the yellow highlight. And like I said, that's how it's written up.
Right, that's just that's just definitions.
You can't say that's just definitions, because with the Soldier Sales Marine Fund, we have to follow the state statutes.
No, I understand, but where is that fund in the statutes?
That's what I was asking, we have to.
Because it's
find out.
not this.
We'll have to find out.
We're trying to find out where the money is coming from.
I'll find that.
I have it in my truck, I'll make sure you guys have it before I leave.
Okay. Do you want to put your name and number up here?
It's not legally a war.
That would be good. Oh, you have cards. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yes.
Excuse me.
And I apologize, there's like 10 million different funds and
Right.
areas, I'm just not familiar.
I can pull it up.
Excuse me, how do they define war in that definition?
It says wartime, so if we were.
Service in time of war means service of 90 or more cumulative days during a period of war unless separated from service earlier because of an injury incurred or aggravated in line of duty or a service-connected disability rated by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, except that if the period of war lasted less than 90 days, service in time of war means service for the entire period of war, and then it goes on and on. So it's in here.
No, what I'm asking, what defines a war?
Well, it defines period of war.
What defines a war?
It's very long, and it has specific dates for specific periods. There's the Vietnam era, means a
Okay,
period
so
of
they
beginning.
clarify
end.
which areas are.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it's defined specific dates for specific periods.
so it should be war or conflict.
It doesn't say conflict, I don't think.
Well, so for example, Afghanistan is between October 24th, 2001.
Well, I understand,
and August
but they're
30th.
being inclusive as to a war officially as dictated by Congress
This, by this.
versus a conflict which is not.
Yes.
Okay, thank
And the
you.
dates and it's all written here.
So does anybody else have any specific questions, or we can go over some of the bills that we
I have a general
Or
question.
complaints, we're good at taking.
I have a general question. Will the three of you please tell us when you talk about the specific bills, how you voted on these bills, okay? And could we hear about those major bills that did not pass and how you voted on those?
Well, there are literally thousands of bills.
I said major.
I cannot remember how I voted on every bill, nor can I remember every single bill that came across the House. Everything is public record. All of our votes on every single bill is all out there.
I understand that.
Nothing hidden.
I agree, it's nothing hidden, but searching for it is difficult.
Is there a
The
bill in
way-
particular you're interested in?
The level of being able to go through the Connecticut legislative system needs to be redone. And we should be able to call up your name and exactly see how you vote on every single bill in every single time.
You actually can. Have you ever been on the Connecticut General Assembly website?
Yes.
Okay. If you want, when we're done, I can show you. It's
Please.
actually, you can actually go pretty quickly and find out how we voted. But of course, you need to know how to maneuver that a little bit.
That's right.
And I'm happy to show you that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I'm fairly new to the neighborhood.
And who are you?
I'm Anne Cummings.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. From Plainfield. I live on High Meadow Drive. And I have the U-line warehouse pretty much in my backyard, which I was somewhat unaware of when I moved in. And then I immediately find out about the trash plant and the Costco. And as I'm sure you're aware, many people in this area are very upset about our quiet corner, which we chose specifically, having come from a very quiet place in Vermont, to live here. And we really like the rural character, especially in our backyard on the other side of the forest. And anyway, to get more to my point, is DEEP or the legislature trying to hold even these developers accountable for instance, having bonds that are put aside for if there is an environmental disaster, which this town has seen before. There's 2 Superfund sites already in Plainfield. 3, excuse me, I'm corrected. I just read about 2 recently. There's no way we can there is such a thing as environmental justice, and this is not justice.
You are an environmental justice community.
We know.
You just do
Yes,
not
I
meet the
read that
threshold.
recently, yes.
So I can
why
tell you-
would we even be considered
Okay,
to
because
cite
the
another
Democratic
possible?
legislature has voted down every single initiative that we have tried. And the governor and the administration have.
Which ones are those?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I'm gonna look them up.
Yeah, what would that be? Okay, there's 3 bills, we'll give you the bill numbers.
Yeah.
Which
I wanna
actually,
see who
can you
voted.
let me finish?
Yep.
Thank you. Which changed the law, which right now, when they passed environmental justice, it was for 10,000 or less. We tried to change that to 16,000 to 20,000 so that you would be able to vote on whether you wanted to have a trash facility within your jurisdiction or not. That is the bill. There was one passed out of the House, one passed out of the Senate. They both passed. The governor vetoed both of those bills. The governor and the administration have no interest in allowing Plainfield to be able to vote as to whether you want a trash facility here or not. That is the truth. There's also a bill that came out this year out of the House that passed for the same type of request, and there was one in the Senate that did not get called in the Senate. So for 3 people that are in the minority to be able to get 3 bills out of both the House and the Senate with bipartisan support, it's the administration that will not go along with what the legislature wants.
And that was based on,
Out of 4 bills last year, he vetoed 2 of them, and 2 were to do with Plainfield. So we'll get you the bill numbers after, you can go look it up.
Have you talked to the governor as to what he would accept as a potential bill?
He is being pressured by the CBIA and the building trades to make sure that this happens. Feel free to write the governor.
We have.
I've been in
We have.
almost constant contact with the governor's
Yep.
office during the legislative session. And they will admit that they're under a lot of pressure because it's an election year, and they're under pressure from both the business lobby, which is essentially CBIA, Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and organized labor, because they want to be able to build plants. And they don't want the towns to be able to interfere with their ability to build plants.
So the governor, there's a siting council that will be overseeing this.
Yeah.
The people on the siting council are assigned by the governor. They're the people that he puts on these committees, and they will be making these decisions.
And we have offered bills in the past to change the makeup of the siting council, to make sure that there is a local representative that's on that council when the council's making a decision, and that too has been rejected. So your representatives have done a Herculean task of getting 4 bills passed and the governor vetoing them, and also granting to the siting council. The power is within the community. I've had my other communities fight solar farms. You probably need to get and think about intervening status with your first selectman if you don't want it here. I know that you don't want it here. The 3 of us have been doing everything within our power, and we've gotten bipartisan support. All Republicans supported this. Some Democrats did. But when it got out of the committees and out of the House, the governor vetoed it. So that's where your anger should be focused on the governor. Why did you veto that?
Well, and some of them that weren't called, because Senator Summers mentioned those, that's all decided by the Democrat leadership, what will be called and what won't be. So while we put them in, they still have to be called. The one that we had in the House never got called in the Senate. The one she had in the Senate never got called in the House. So
The makeup of the bills, how were they similar? How were they different from one another? What basically
We can
did
get you copies of the bills. They basically say the same thing as
Okay, so basically it's the same strategy.
Well,
Well,
they're looking numbers
we're looking
change, there's tweaks, they're not exactly the same, you can't run the same bill, so it's slightly different.
but each one is to empower the community
No,
to
To
participate.
allow to be able to vote.
Yeah, the language might be a little different, but they're all about giving you the power to participate and have a voice in this.
I understand that, and I respect all the work that you put in.
Yeah.
I really do. You got a thankless job going against ONG and smart technologies, and I agree with that. The concern that I have is that you made sure there were 4 different bills, all of which were tweaks in language, so they were 4 different bills, but basically the same.
With the same
basic-
outcome. They're not
No,
written the same.
the same strategy to get the same outcome.
well,
No, I think-
what we're doing is we are taking advantage of existing law. Right now, Plainfield fits within a certain niche in the community of towns. And that niche is that it is an environmental justice community. And the hook to get a change to allow Plainfield to vote on whether or not to take the plant is the environmental justice law. There aren't a ton of different laws and a ton of different strategies that we could use. That is the cleanest and best shot we have at getting Plainfield the opportunity to vote.
The problem is, that's a very broad strategy. If you move the number of towns in this type of bill up to 15,000, that puts in, that the number of towns that are between the population of 10,000 and 15,000 are tremendous.
No, there are very few of them that are
I did
environmental
a count of
justice
this.
communities.
I did a count of the states.
Yeah, but they have to be environmental.
They have to be
justice.
environmental justice communities,
makes it whittles
which
the number
there are,
way down.
there are only 28 of them of any size in the state.
Out of 169.
Oh. this is
Okay, and
one
how
of
many
them.
of those have a population between 10,000 and 15,000?
I think 2.
Which ones?
Well, it's Plainfield, and I think there's one out in the west of the state somewhere.
Okay.
So
That's
that
true.
really is the hook. That's our best shot. And to just say, well, come up with some other strategy, that is literally the best way to do it.
Well, using the environmental justice law is going to be mandated. But if you take a look at how they created data to put into the equation, they have an experimental methodology which has no data behind it. Therefore, it's estimated. Therefore, it's biased because they have some cost in it.
Correct. But those are all arguments that are to be made before the siting council.
What?
We're trying to bypass that by giving the town a vote instead of
But by
having to
then
make
it's gonna
those
be
arguments.
illegal.
Just don't put it in a residential area. This is a residential area. Make an argument, simple. If it is in a residential zone for a residential area, the planning and zoning board have say.
But that's not how it's set up.
Yeah.
And we're not, and remember, the Democrats are in charge, and they make the rules. I'm just laying it out for you. We don't have the power to change that.
The thing is,
So this
the Democrats will like local rule.
No, they don't.
Oh, they will.
They're the ones that changed the housing laws.
They hate local
They hate
rules.
local rules. They want
That's the whole
to.
point.
But with regard to something that's pollutant,
Could I ask a
That's what the
question?
siting council is there for. It's to override local rules.
Are we here to argue with Democrats
We are
or?
trying to
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know
circumvent that by
I have a
allowing,
question. I'll put my hand up.
environmental justice communities to vote instead of having to go through siting
Siting
council.
council.
Well,
I understand that.
let me just say this. I don't know if you're Democrat or Republican. I didn't do a survey, so I'm not trying to, but I'm telling you what the layout
I
of
do. I'm
land
not
is
a
current,
selectman.
and that is the fact. They have decided, the governor picked the siting council, they will make the decision. We've tried several times to get a voice for the people here in Plainfield at no avail.
You getting this?
yeah.
Oh, good.
Because-
Can I ask a question? When they came for the public hearing, I got up towards the end and I asked a question about the Army Corps of Engineers getting involved, and I just recently read the permits I had on that. The Army Corps of Engineers gave 2 permits for that property, okay? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, they're federal, aren't they? They're not state. And they got mad at me for bringing that up when I asked if they had reached out to the Army Corps of Engineers, because there were 2 permits pulled through them for the big access road, and I think for a crossing, a wetlands crossing or something. They were very interested in that property, and in the both permits is a proposal of how they're going to reclaim the land, okay? That's not the case anymore. Nobody's reached out to the Army Corps of Engineers to tell them that there's a trash plant proposed there.
And by the
Is there a chance that could help?
Whenever
If somebody contacted them?
an application to the siting council is put in, and again, there is no application yet.
Mhm.
No application has been put in. Actually, that's not true. They put in an application, but they pulled it because they had done it incorrectly.
Okay.
So when they put in an application, they have to, by law, send a copy to various entities, including the Army Corps, if there's any Army Corps jurisdiction there. They'll send a copy to DEEP, they'll send a copy to the governor's office, they'll send a copy to me because it's in my district, they'll send a copy to Senator Summers. So, there'll be a lot of copies of this application. Now, I never got a copy of the original application because they pulled it so fast. So I've never seen it. But
I'm just wondering if a resident were to reach out to them now to get ahead of it, say, hey, this is what's being proposed.
Well, they know what's being proposed.
You think?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Can I tell you real quick, 2 neighbors of that lot have recorded that they're already digging down there. One has pictures.
They're clear
So
cutting.
we have to find out what's going on because
Yeah, I'm sure they're
O&G,
digging test holes.
No, they're clear cutting.
They're clear.
Everything. They say it's bad. Yeah, they're not reclaiming anything, so they're not
already working down there.
even
So
following zoning,
I just let
planning
you
and
know.
zoning.
You
But
have to realize that's the second phase of the gravel operation.
Well, does zoning require...
now they're way into third and fourth, I
permit to
think.
cut trees? Does zoning require a permit to cut trees?
Well, in there, they can only have so many phases open at a time. Is the thing.
Phases
Of operation, of gravel operations. It's a gravel operation right now. There's 9 phases in there. It's like 30-year dig. And they went through 1 and 2, I believe, already. I don't know if they're being reclaimed, but
That's not the...
I don't know.
Traffic plan.
Yeah.
It's the existing operation.
yeah, the existing, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
another question.
They're ramping up.
I know there was a few bills that a couple of you opposed that had to do with environmental and consumer protections, which, you know, the people in our area are very concerned about the pollution, the waste infrastructure, environmental oversight. How do you guys determine when regulation is necessary to protect public health, like even in our district, versus when it becomes too burdensome on business?
I have to
Because
give
there's
you the
a
bill
fine
number.
line.
You have to give me the bill number. We vote on.
SB 00452, SB 00457, and PA 26-68.
PAs, that's not a bill number, that's a public act, so.
So some,
What are they? Four,
But do you not vote on those? No?
452?
so
Yeah.
That's a Senate bill.
452 and 457, right? And just before I even
Yeah.
look at them, just so you know, they're,
Has to do with the recycling and consumer protections, and it seems like you're out to protect businesses more than you are like the
That's a nice
public.
narrative, but that's not true. I have a very strong environmental record. You have to actually read the bills because sometimes there's a lot of things in the bills that are hidden. I can give you an example. This year there was a bill that has to do with insurance, and there was a 5% fee added to that to fund climate change. That's something I voted against because our insurances are already enough. So you really have to read the bills. I'll have to go and look at the bills to see what hidden little things are in there. You can't just read the titles because it's like picking up a book. You don't know if the king is actually a crook in the book until you actually read the book. There could have been amendments.
And therein lies
so-
a problem with our system.
Let's put them on.
You know, if you just voted on line items, it would go a lot faster, and wouldn't you get a lot more done?
452 was the balloon bill.
Yeah, exactly.
I voted for that. That's
Bottle redemption, modernization, and the recycling fraud prevention.
No, the 452 is an act concerning the release of lighter-than-air balloons.
That
It's-
too.
It's a littering bill.
But it all, yeah, littering, it
And I
also
voted
had
for it.
bottle
I voted
redemption,
for that also.
modernization, and recycling, fraud prevention, and a lot of other things there.
What's the other bill number?
SB 00457, and I think that one was, more on environmental health impacts and pollution reduction.
Well, that's the bottle bill.
Recycling
457
systems,
is the
yeah.
bottle bill. It's an act concerning the state's bottle bill. And the bottle bill has been a contentious issue for decades. And what happened was, every state in New England has a 5-cent.
I voted for both those bills. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the bottle bill, every state in New England has a 5-cent redemption value. Connecticut raised its redemption value to 10 cents. So what was happening was bottles were coming in from all the other states because somebody would have a 5-cent, they would have a 5-cent deposit, they could get 10 cents in Connecticut. And the redemption centers were getting so far over redeemed they were giving out more money than they were collecting, that they were essentially going broke. And my proposal, which many of I think all the Republicans supported and half a dozen or so Democrats supported, was to bring the redemption value back down to 5 cents. But the Democrats refused to do that. They wanted to keep it at 10 cents and have taxpayers cover the deficit. So we've got literally tractor trailers, millions and millions of bottles and cans coming in from other states. And that money is essentially just being pissed away to New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and it's just going out. And so we were proposing, let's just bring it back to 5 cents like every other state in New England, and that way we wouldn't have to spend taxpayer money for people who were committing a crime of bringing these bottles and cans in.
So there was some changes to that bill. So we didn't lower the redemption rate. The reason why, I just want to explain that they raised it is because if you look at the data, and I supported raising it to 10 cents, the recycling redemption goes from like 33% to 90%. So you want people to recycle. We were not thinking about having literally probably an organized effort from New York coming in after night with tractor trailer loads of bottles. And what they do at the redemption centers, they're not putting them in one at a time. They're weighing them. And most of those bottles had been redeemed someplace else, so they're getting additional dollars. So our distributors that are responsible for the 5 cents were paying out more than they ever actually sold. So they were redeeming bottles we don't even sell in Connecticut. So we changed the law, so now there's a limit on how many bottles. You have to show an ID, and some of them you actually are going to have to put in by hand to try to avoid what's happening
Well,
at
that
the
makes
border.
more sense to put safeguards in
That's the bill
and get the money
that
that you
is
need
supported.
and put the safeguards in.
Right, so.
So that was the other thing I wanted to ask.
Can I let him ask a question?
Oh, sure.
He hasn't asked one. Sorry.
Yeah, on page 4, you're talking about appropriations, and on the second paragraph, halfway through, it says, we also authorized $249.3 million in efficiency appropriations to agency across the general fund. Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, $200 million is an awful lot.
Yeah, that is nothing compared to some of our deficits. Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, we have a $287 million deficit. So you run on your budget, but there are certain things that are considered an entitlement and they have to be paid, and that's one of them. So, they run, but many of our departments run into deficit, and we have to figure out, we have something called an FAC, appropriations, which then we have to go and we have to authorize the correction and refund them.
I do have another question, kind of thinking back to previous conversation. Last year we had a non-binding referendum about the trash plan, and it was overwhelmingly against. Did that information get run up the chain of command, so to speak? And how was the response as it went through the various agencies and hopefully to the government?
They haven't really, so the entire reason there is a siting council, just so you know, I know you brought it up over here at the table, is because they have the authority to put it in a residential zone, to put it in near an aquifer. That's why the governor set up a siting council. They can overrule all of your local zoning.
So
and because most people are not going to want a trash facility here, or a solar facility. Now, I have been successful in fighting certain things in my district, not necessarily in Plainfield, but solar, but the whole community has got to get involved because this isn't a legislative fix. This is a local, and this is the governor's fix, the siting council. Everybody turned out at the public hearings. Everybody complained. We had an attorney amongst our group that did it pro bono, somebody from the town, to be able to argue it because it's a siting council, and the siting council are all appointed by the governor. This is not something that we can legislatively go in and say, stop this. I wish we could, but that's not the role that we have.
Would you describe this siting council as not bipartisan?
Assigned by the governor. I mean, he's gonna pick.
They're supposed to not be political at all.
They
you know?
say that their job is to cite things that people don't want.
Yes.
So they, you know, if they have, let's say they have a nuclear reactor. Well, there isn't a town in the state that wants a nuclear reactor, but if the governor says, we're building a nuclear reactor in this state somewhere, the siting council will decide where that nuclear reactor is going to go. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to create a bypass for Plainfield, for this plant. So you will have the opportunity to vote on it, and although the siting council can bypass your zoning, we're trying to create a bypass for you to vote to bypass the siting council.
So they would override, this siting council would override any type of local
Anything.
statutes that we have in the
Absolutely.
town.
Yes.
And that's why
So
we-
basically what you're saying is we need a new governor.
I agree with that. And so when you hear like, what you heard before, that one party wants local control, that's just not true. We passed a housing bill that takes all of your local control away, and that was a party line vote. They did it with homeschooling that took away your ability to homeschool without having DCF involved. They took away your ability to choose what vaccines you want as an adult. So the local low-income housing, whether it's like your own choice of where you want to school your child or how or what vaccines you want to take, that has all been stripped away, and it has not been stripped away by the three of us sitting here. So there's more and more control going in and taking away your local rights. And that may not be like how it is here, but that's how it is in Hartford. I can give you an example. This year we spent $170 million additional for education. I sent out appropriations. I'm one of the leaders in appropriations. We wanted the base to be raised, so every student's base got raised. The governor didn't want to do that because this is a one-time gimmick, because it's an election year. He wanted to give more money for education, and $170 million is a lot of money. However, he gave an additional 100 to 3 cities. Plainfield didn't make out. You have just as high a poverty rate as some of the other cities. You didn't get any more. You got some out of the 170, but you didn't get, $50 million like Hartford did, or New Haven did, or Bridgeport did. So there's a lot in there that you're not hearing. It's very different locally than it is in Hartford. And so, it's not easy. You can't paint everybody with one brush. You had a question.
Yeah, so I see that the budget is in here, right? And just to kind of piggyback off what we were talking about, and I know that there's a lot of really good investments in our small towns in that budget. Like you said, also the ECS stuff, like getting lots of funding. How did each of you vote on the budget? If you have a reason for why you either voted in favor or against, what's that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I voted against it. We have a 2-year budget. In a long session, which is in the odd years, we are in session from January through June. In the short session, which is what just happened in even years, we're in from February to May. So it's a shorter period. We do a 2-year budget in the long session. It's supposed to cover 2 years. In the short session, we do essentially adjustments, budget adjustments. So if we look at the spreadsheet and one thing has gone up and another thing has gone down, we're supposed to adjust it to make sure that everything is still on track. Well, that doesn't seem to happen anymore. And what does happen is we do an entire new budget in the short session, which we should not be doing. We should be doing our budget adjustments. And in this supposed budget adjustment, we increase spending by 8%. Well, we should not be increasing spending by 8% in a short session when we're just supposed to be doing budget adjustments. So yes, it is true that the governor threw in a whole bunch of money as an incentive to the towns, but it is one-time money. It's not going to continue. It may look good, but it masks an 8% increase in our overall spending. Plus, we got that budget. It was, how many hundred pages? It's a lot of pages. 700-page budget. We got it the night before. There isn't anybody on the planet that can read 700 pages overnight and be ready to discuss it rationally with all the figures the next day. I certainly couldn't. And I'm not going to vote for something that I have not had a chance to read. We should have had it 2 weeks before.
So I'm the opposite. I sit on the budget committee. I did have access to some of the budget before. And I supported the budget. I think there's many things in here that are really good initiatives. And there's some not great initiatives too. I can see you could vote for it and have an argument, or you could vote against it and have an argument. But I do think that it was something going through the budget, spending as much time as I did in the budget committee with Kathy Austin, which is lovely. We had 4 women running the budget this year for the first time in Connecticut history. Understanding why we were adding certain dollars in certain areas, removing certain areas. One of the things I felt really strongly about, which really didn't affect Plainfield that much this time, but will, is what we have. It's called hold harmless. All of our small towns up here, including Plainfield, are slated to be losing education funding based on your population. It's been a priority of mine, being on this budget committee, to make sure you're held harmless so you don't lose that money, because just because you lose 3 students doesn't mean you're going to lose a teacher. That was really important for me in this budget. We also, the governor took a lot of credit for this budget, but he had cut education funding. He cut $12 million, for example, for magnet schools. Magnet schools are really big in my district, and you're taking away $12 million for them. There's no money to transport students, etc. And magnet schools are public schools. I felt really strongly about putting that money back in. He cut money for a victim's advocate. I've sat through trial after trial with constituents. Victim's advocate was really important. We actually got an additional one put in New London, which we need. So there's a lot of things in that budget I felt really strongly about. And also, we got money for your VFW in that budget. There are things that were very important to my districts, and I wholeheartedly support it. I understand why some people will not. So I think you can have an argument to support it or not. But for me, it was overwhelmingly positive for my district and my town, so I felt it was important to support it. Yes, sir.
Maybe you can address the discrepancy. You had a couple weeks to work on it because you were on a budget.
I worked on this budget from day 1 till day end.
Can you answer why?
Well, I understand. I mean,
Representative Dubitsky didn't get it until the night before.
that's not me. What we have the budget. The governor comes out with a budget. Appropriations takes that budget. We mark it up. We change things. Sometimes we add. We break into subcommittees. Being on the budget committee is the most laborious, time-consuming process that there is. We have 24-hour hearings. Our nonprofits really needed to be funded. They got a small COLA increase. They really needed more. We have nonprofits doing what I call God's work, that if the state did it, it would cost like 5 times what our nonprofits do. And we need to be able to fund them so they can hire people. And so we work on it for months and months. We create an appropriations budget, and we bring it out for a vote. It goes to the governor's office. They mark it up, and at the very end, this budget comes out, and I didn't get to see the 700-page budget in advance, but I knew a lot of the things that were in there. Our caucus takes it. We split it up into like 25-page sections amongst each other. We each go through a section, and then we come back and we talk about what's in the budget. That's how we manage the 700 pages in 3 hours. So I might have had a little bit more knowledge But the House and the Senate don't always agree on certain things, you know, within our own parties even. There's many people in my Senate that supported it, and there's others that did not, so.
I mean, that's understandable, but that still hasn't answered the question of why Representative Dubitsky.
I can't tell you why he votes a certain way, but I can tell you why I
No,
vote a certain
why
way.
he didn't get that information.
Because
Nobody gets that
the
information.
Really?
the policy we have is we must get it at least 12 hours prior to. So if we are in session at 10 in the morning, it might come out at 10 at night. Now, I don't know how many of you go to bed at 10, but many of us do because we have to be there early in the morning. So
Yeah, this
wait,
budget's
so
not at 3
the
a.m.
time is ticking through our sleeping hours. So literally, we don't lay eyes on it till we get in there. I too voted no. For me, you know, increasing our spending by almost $2 billion in an adjustment budget was unacceptable. I can't tell you, I have not spoken to one person in Plainfield, Killingly, or Sterling who has told me they're okay with their taxes being increased. The Office of Fiscal Analysis, who is a non-biased, they're not Democrat, they're not Republican, has already said that it'll put us in a deficit in the next 2 years by almost $1 billion. I think we need to reel in what we're spending, and we need to be very cautious about what we're doing and look at it. And look, you know, we're glad that all the towns got a little bit of money, but you know, you don't give your kids money if it's going to put you in debt the next year. We all have to be careful. We have to spend the money very carefully. That's how I look at it. And the other thing I would just add is when those budgets come to us, or any 99.9% of the bills that come to the floor to us will pass because they're put in by the majority and they already have the votes. They don't bring bills to the floor that don't have the votes. So that budget was sent to us and it was going to pass. We knew it was going to pass. But, you know, and as Senator Summers said, they have a very different debate oftentimes than we have in the House. So we're hearing different information. What they're hearing is different. So we're kind of taking that in and making decisions and saying, you know what? I don't think that my constituents would want this. I don't think, you know, so on and so forth. She hears different debates. We hear different debates. So it is very different. So that's what I'll say about that, but I did not know.
Right, but the 12-hour rule, you know, I heard a couple of snickers because 12 hours overnight is not enough time. That rule is actually very new. In 2017, there were, right now the Republicans have 12, how many members you have in the Senate? 12 members out of 36. And in the House we have 47 out of 151 currently. In 2017, there were 18 and 18 in the Senate, and in the House we had 74 out of 151. So it was very close in both chambers. The Republicans passed through both chambers a Republican budget. Even though we were in the minority, we passed our budget. The first and only time that anybody can remember that happening anywhere in the country, that the minority party passed their budget. The governor vetoed that budget, and that started discussion as to a bipartisan budget. And part of that bipartisan budget in 2017 was a requirement that we get at least 12 hours to look at the document before it gets voted on. It used to be, before that, we would start debating the budget before we even ever saw it. We would come in at 10 in the morning and we'd start debating this budget, and suddenly this gigantic 1,100-page document would get dropped on our desks and said, "This is the bill we're talking about now." It's like, how the heck am I supposed to go through 1,100 pages while we're talking about it? And we're going to vote on it in a couple of hours. That was crazy. So at least now we have 12 hours. supposedly. I don't think we've ever actually gotten the full 12 hours, but at least now that's the rule.
Well, and I would add too that a bill of that size, I mean, I would say a bill that's over 50 pages, and we get a lot of them. We call them omnibus bills. They're very, very big, and they have a lot of things in them. And as Senator Summer said, there are some good things in there. We're not going to sit here and say there was nothing good in it. But there, you have to sit there and weigh it out, and you have to look at it and say, oh my gosh, this thing is huge. So if you vote no because of this, this, and this, it looks like you voted no against some good things. But it's not always the case. There's good things, and there's not so good things. So we have to make that decision, and it's challenging. We're looking at these big bills, and I don't know how many we got. What they did a lot of this year was put a lot of bills into one big bill. So you might have been in a committee and said no to one bill, or no to 5 of the 8 bills, or 6 of the 11 bills that are in the big bill, and you couldn't support that, but you could support this, and then you had to say, okay, what am I going to do here? And we got a lot of that this year. A lot of the bills, they run out of time, and they'll put a lot of small bills into big bills. So,
you want to mention the lobster bill, which was in that giant monstrosity of a labor bill?
I'm not sure they want to hear that. I can give you a concrete example of things that happened. I had a bill that is still there that has to do with the last lobsterman we have in the state of Connecticut, which I happen to represent. Each state has a certain size that we are allowed to harvest for lobsters coming in. And that's the problem. Are you guys going to continue to talk? I'm sorry, the other people can't hear. So, if we pass this bill that was being pushed by the Restaurant Association, they were going to ask that Connecticut be allowed to bring in undersized lobsters from another state. Now, no other state allows that. There's no way to enforce it, so you have no idea if someone was taking they call them a short lobster from Long Island Sound, or if they got it from Maine. Deep was against it. All the fishermen were against it. They took a vote. They read the bill. I made a big stink about it in environment. The Environment Committee said we will not bring this bill out. It was dead. But the Restaurant Association went to a leader and they shoved the language into a really good labor bill. So it was Section 64 of a labor bill. It had nothing to do with labor, other than if you pass this, you're going to destroy the lobster industry. You will have no lobstermen in the state of Connecticut, so we should set up a special fund for them. So I had to vote against that bill, even though there was good things in it, because my constituency down south was adamant about this is going to destroy lobsters. Now, I got a fix in the implementer. I went to the governor's office and I said, if you do this, you're going to be known as the governor who put the last commercial fishing fleet out of business. Don't come get your picture taken down at the dock like you do every year. So we got a fix in the budget implementer, which said we're not going to pass this bill, is going to get pushed out for a year. So I have a year to come up with a way to stop it. So there's all this different maneuvering that goes on. But I wanted to support that labor bill. There was a lot of good things in that labor bill. Why are lobsters in a labor bill? And so I had to vote against it because I'm going to do everything I can to save the last 15 lobstermen we have in the state of Connecticut. So those are the types of things that go on. And then someone will say, oh, you voted against this labor bill, blah, blah, blah. But they don't bother to ask you why. They don't bother to ask you how it affected your district. And that's why I have to say, you can't just look at the title. Another good example, I'll never forget this, 10 years ago when I was elected, there was a bill that was a task force to study youth at risk. Sounds great. I probably would have supported it, except somebody did what we call a strike-all amendment, where they go and they take the entire guts of the bill and toss it in the can. Then they put something else in that has nothing to do with youth at risk. So here we are on the floor arguing against this bill. They never changed the titles. So somebody watching would probably say, why are they arguing against a task force to study youth at risk? Because it had nothing to do with it at that point. So you really have to be careful on the titles of the bills and what's in it. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot. It's very misleading. Or, you'll have a bill that's like, the act concerning the beautification and the, encouraging a better way of life in the state of Connecticut, some nebulous title.
We had,
And then nothing in it has to do with it.
and we had well over 50% of our bills were straight off this year. Every completely gutted and rewritten. So you could have been on the public health committee, had a public health bill come out to the floor. We would have heard testimony, debated it, voted on it, and then you get it on the House floor or the Senate floor, and it's completely different. So then you're scrambling to see what's in it, what's different, what did they take out, what did they add in, and you're really trying to pay attention in a short amount of time when they bring it out. So it happened very often this year.
And with that, the labor bill that had the lobster provision in it, section 64, I introduced an amendment to strip the lobster provision out, so it would just be a labor bill, because lobsters had nothing to do with the labor bill. And all the Republicans voted for it. I think a couple of Democrats voted for it too, but it didn't pass. So the lobster bill and the lobster provision stayed in the labor bill. So I couldn't vote for it because it had that lobster bill in it.
It sounds like this is something the legislature needs to reform. All
It's the same story on
Nation.
all sides, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter whose discussion you go to, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it's the same response, because both sides do the same thing because it's allowed. So until we fix the system, good things are not going to happen, bad things are going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't do it any other way. Apparently, this is the way the system works.
This is what I'll say to that. The Democrats in Connecticut are the supermajority, and they make all those decisions. So we can't change that until they want to change it. So that it will stay that way.
Everybody has to want to change it. And the Democrats say they do want to change it, but they don't.
Right, we would need the votes to change it. We just gave examples of things where you might have gotten a few, but not enough. We would need to be able to get more. I think, what are the numbers in the Senate? There's 36 senators, I think 11 are Republicans, the rest are Democrats, and then in the House.
I will say, you are correct. I'm just going to pick on the lobster bill because it's a good example. The woman who, it was her labor bill, she didn't even know that they stuck lobsters in there. So, what happens is you have these, some lobbyists have more power than others. So they'll go to the leader. This one went to the leader of the Democratic House. They're friends. They said, shove it in the bill. So the poor woman in the Senate, Julie, she's like, I didn't know this was in here. And I only knew it was in there because Deep called me and said, you're never going to believe this, Heather. They shoved it in the labor bill. So, it's that good stuff. So we caught it, but that's, sometimes it's not a Democrat or a Republican, it's a leader who has a relationship and something gets shoved in the bill. That's why if we could slow down the process, but the process does not get slowed down. The closer you get to the end, the busier it gets. And that's why I can understand. There are some people that will vote no on everything because they haven't had an opportunity to read through the entire bill. Doesn't mean they don't support stuff, but I have to respect that too. So that's just sort of how the sausage is made. It's not.
We understand it's made that way, but people are losing faith in their government on all levels, from here all the way up.
You say that both sides do it, and you're absolutely right.
They do.
You're right, because there's a thing called a dummy bill. A dummy bill is essentially a bill that doesn't say anything. It has no substance to it whatsoever. What it has is it has a title and a bill number, and it changes one word slightly. So it would change mankind to humankind or something like that, which makes no substantive difference,
right.
But it's a bill.
It changes the number on the bill.
Correct. So what happens is those bills go to committee, because you can't have a bill that goes to the floor and gets passed into law unless it's going through committee. So those bills go to committee, and they go to a public hearing. And nobody testifies about them because they don't mean anything. They don't say anything. They're just out there. There's a bill with a number. And what happens is they will then, after they've gone through public hearing, somebody will strip out all the little bit of nonsense that's in the bill, and they'll put an entire new substance into it, and they'll run that on the floor. Now, I have had a one-man crusade against dummy bills for the last, since I got into office. And every single dummy bill that comes through, I get up and I make a speech and I say how we should not be doing dummy bills, and both sides do it, and we should not be using dummy bills because it circumvents the public hearing process, and they go through anyway. Over the last few years, I've started to get a couple of people on my committees who are now voting with me every time against the dummy bills. But they're still out there. That's the process. I think it's a bad process. I will continue to fight against that process. And you're right, both sides use them.
I presume that sooner or later you're going to use a dummy bill to get rid of dummy bills.
It's a good idea. Write that one down.
Write that down.
So Senator Summers has another meeting to go to, and it's after 7, so if you have any questions, please ask them. I know this woman here, and then we'll get to yours.
My question relates probably to just what you were speaking about, how a bill, you don't always vote against the whole bill, just part of the bill. But healthcare and workforce rural access, that's my question. And there's a related bill of SB 00125, HB 005567, and PA 26-68.
I'm sorry, give me one of the numbers. They're all the same bill?
They're related bills.
Okay, give me one number.
SB 00125. And it has to do with staffing shortages and healthcare stability. Now, many residents in Plainfield are already delaying care because of cost and distance or lack of providers. Now, you voted against the bill. Now, this is probably where this is going to fall in. You can let us know why. Aimed at stabilizing healthcare systems, healthcare staffing, and nursing home accountability. What concrete policies are you proposing instead to ensure rural residents can actually access affordable care close to home? Or why did you vote against it?
What are the numbers? Sorry. I voted for 125, so I'm not sure where you're at.
Okay, and HB 05567?
557?
5567. These are just related bills to this bill. And I'm sure you must have some.
I voted for that bill also. One has to do with healthcare in the prison system, which I've been a huge advocate for, and I have voted for both bills. So I can tell you a lot of people why they didn't vote for it. I can tell you why I did vote for it. I sit on public health. I do think that we need to be proactive with nursing homes. The big discussion this year had to do with private equity funding in nursing homes and hospitals that take an exorbitant amount of time. We argued there's many people that voted against that because they do believe that there should be private equity in hospitals and there should be private equity in nursing homes, but not a controlling interest. So that's where we ended up. You can't have hospitals, you can't have long-term care facilities if there's no private equity because they can't survive. But the big kicker is they will not be able to survive financially. This does not work. But we wanted to make sure that if you have a private equity investment in a hospital, that you can't do a sales leaseback agreement, and that you're not a controlling interest. So you're not 51% and you're not operationally in control. Those things were not in place previously, and that's why we ran into the issue with Prospect, where we had 4 different hospitals go bankrupt. Private equity came in, 100% private equity, took all the profit out and let the hospital die on the vine, and then we had to fix it, and now UConn owns them. Some of these bills are somewhat complicated, so there are people that feel strongly the government should not be telling an organization, what kind of investment they can make. I don't agree with that because it's healthcare and there is federal funding. So I feel like you can have private equity, but it can't be a controlling interest. And you, the clinicians, need to be in charge of how care is delivered. So that's
I
why I
also voted
supported
for that
it.
bill, 5567, I voted for it.
So some of the other bills, quickly, that we can go over, the hot ones. One came out of public health, which had to do with vaccinations. This is the first time that a bill like this has passed, and it was really discouraging. There was a bill that passed, I believe it was in 2020, on child vaccinations, basically saying, in layman's terms, you will follow the schedule of vaccinations, and if you don't, your child is no longer eligible for an education in the state of Connecticut. There was a lawsuit filed against that because people felt that we were taking away their religious right if they objected to certain vaccines. There was 3 issues in that lawsuit. 2 were thrown out. The one remaining issue, which Doug, who's an attorney, can probably explain better than me, but it had to do with a RIPA law, which is your religious right. You have to remove a religious right in the least burdensome way. That was the only pending argument in front of the Supreme Court. The state of Connecticut tried to get it thrown out. The Supreme Court upheld it. It was going to be heard by the Connecticut Supreme Court. I believe because the state did not want to be liable for a judgment that would go against the bill, what they did is they put a new bill in on vaccines that said RIPA applies to everything except for vaccinations. So they usurped the whole judicial process by not allowing the judge to be able to make a decision because they passed the bill as he is making the decision. That's never been done before. It's super wrong, and there's a lot of people that voted against it. But within that particular language, they added something, and I come from the medical world. They use the word standard of care. They are going to create a standard of care for adults for vaccines. When you are a clinician, if you deviate from the standard of care, which will be set by our Commissioner of Public Health, you can be liable. You will be sued. If I deviate and I'm delivering a baby and I deviate from the standard of care and how I deliver the baby, I am subject to liability. So if the state of Connecticut comes up with a vaccine standard of care, which they said they will, and they change the language from child to resident, which means all of us here, and your clinician does not abide by that, they can be sued. And we brought up things like your insurance could drop you if you decide you don't want to take vaccines, or they could raise the price of your insurance if you don't take the latest and greatest vaccine. Now, many of us believe in vaccines and we want to take them, but there are certain people that don't want to take, let's say, a COVID vaccine because it hasn't been fully safety studied, or they don't want to have to, I'm making this up, get in, what's the one, shingles vaccine, or whatever. Whatever it is. And right now, that's your choice.
Yeah.
But this bill passed, and it's probably not going to be your choice. Because if it becomes part of a standard of care, you probably will not have a choice. Or your choice will be your insurance rates go up, your doctor doesn't see you anymore. Those are things that there was a lot of people that were against. That was the vaccine bill. Then there was a homeschooling
And
bill.
all that power is put in the hands of one single person to determine what that standard of care is.
Correct.
There's no legislative oversight, there's no judicial oversight, there's not even, the governor doesn't even have any oversight. It's just the commissioner. She can make her own decision about everything.
So next year, if a new vaccine comes out for, I don't know, whatever, and they decide to add that to the standard of care, you won't have a choice. Your options are likely going to be, you're going to have to pay more for premium insurance, or you'll be dropped for not being compliant. So it was a really, really, really monstrous, impactful bill.
And one of the things that's likely going to happen is a lot of people are going to go out of state for their doctors. So a lot of the small doctors, the independents, are going to start having a very hard time, especially those close to the border, because people are going to say, well, my doctor must follow this standard of care, and I don't want that vaccine, so I'm going to choose a doctor in Massachusetts, in Rhode Island, or in New York.
Another controversial bill that passed is a homeschooling bill. I don't know if you all have heard about that bill also. But that bill somehow got morphed in with DCF. So we had 4 very horrific outcomes of children that were in DCF care. And they tried to, or the proponent of this particular bill tried to weave in the fact that they were homeschooled. And the focus became on homeschooling rather than the true failure, which is DCF. And for example, one little girl was murdered. Horrific. She was pulled out of school 4 months after she was already dead. DCF was supposedly visiting with her, having an online visit, and the family members put a different child in the place of the child that they were supposed to be seeing. Like massive failure. That's not a homeschooling issue, that's a DCF issue, right? And so we've had multiple cases like that. You heard about the woman who locked the young man in a closet for 32 years. They had been under DCF, what do you call it? Not control, but DCF care for years. And he was never even pulled out for homeschooling. So somehow these 4 terrible cases, which are truly horrific, got morphed into this is a homeschooling problem. And a lot of us do not believe that's the case. So they came out with this whole way now that you have to go through this process if you want to homeschool your child. And I had really had it by the end of session, and I asked them so many questions, and they could not answer anything. For example, what happens if you go and you say, okay, I'm going to homeschool my child? You know, in order to be pulled out of public school to homeschool, I would now have to get a DCF background check, and every single person in my house has to get it. So my 90-year-old father would have to go through that for me to be able to homeschool my child. And I had to ask, okay, let's say I passed, what if my dad had some run in with DCF 50 years ago that I didn't know about? I would not be allowed to homeschool my child. And then I said, well, what if my child isn't vaccinated? You can't go to school if you're not vaccinated. Then what do you do? No answers. So you are taking now an overburdened system of DCF where each caseworker has between 40 and 50 cases that they can't manage now. And we're just going to add another 2,000 cases on top of them to be able to try to see whether you can homeschool your child or you can homeschool your child. It's outrageous. It's just the absolute worst way that we can go. The homeschooling communities, which I've learned a lot about them, they are adamantly opposed to it. And now we're just burdening an already overburdened, agency that's failing. I don't want to set them up to fail. I would rather invest in DCF and make sure they had enough people to be able to care for those who really need it. So those are some of the big controversial bills. That public hearing lasted for 27 hours in education. Ann and I sit on education and listening to families on that. And that was a bill that was not supposed to come out, but it did in the end. So, and the vaccine bill, I think, was 27 hours to listening to people come out.
I thought they were the same boat.
Sorry?
I thought they were on the same boat.
They're not. No, they were on the same day in different conference.
We're in education and public health.
Yeah, so we ran
Two different,
Thank you.
So those are some of the other ones. There is another bill that I didn't really see in here that is, I'm trying to give you the controversial ones. This one has to do with, it didn't pass out of the House, but it passed out of the Senate. I voted against it. It is a bill that says, regardless of the crime, if you are 26 years old, and you commit any crime, you are going to be eligible for early parole because your brain is not fully developed. And I... 26. So I have a real issue with that.
Committed a murder.
I sat through a triple homicide in Griswold that you're probably familiar with. That person had just turned 26 at the time of the crime who committed it. For me, the victim does not care how old you are when you commit the crime. We had 3 people murdered, bludgeoned with a baseball bat, strangled, their house set on fire. It was horrific. That person is going to be eligible for early parole because his brain's not developed and he's 26 years old.
The argument.
That's the argument. So there's a bad bill. I think most of us are thinking, you know, it may be one thing if you were like a shoplifter, but most people don't go to jail in Connecticut anyway. So, but let's say you were larceny or something. I can kind of understand that. But we went through the 7 worst crimes as an amendment. We said, okay, but not for murder under special circumstances. Voted down party lines. Not for raping a child. Voting down party line. Not for strangling an old person. Voted down. I don't remember all the 7, but we went through the 7 worst crimes. Voted down on party lines. And I don't understand that. Like, and I've dealt with so many people that are victims of really horrific crimes. And so that didn't sit well. That bill never got called in the house.
Well, no, it did.
Oh, did it?
It did. We actually had, we had about 5 or 6 hours of debate on that bill. And that bill had bipartisan opposition. The Black and Puerto Rican caucus was split. Half of them wanted it, half of them did not. And a number of the members of that caucus got up and made very impassioned floor speeches about how their own family members had been killed, raped, murdered, very serious crimes, and that they did not believe that that the perpetrators should be given early parole simply because they were 25 years old at the time.
My contact card's there. If you have any questions on any specific bills, I'm happy to. All the ones you said I voted for, so.
The question I have is, I assume in the meetings about that bill, experts in clinical neurology spoke. They said that?
Well, at the public hearings, you get a lot of people, a lot of advocates. Some of the advocates claim to be experts, some of them just claim to be advocates.
I assume the advocates who claim to be experts, what kind of credentials did they show?
It varies.
Yeah, sometimes.
Were they medical?
Some psychiatrists, some whatever. There's a variety.
Yeah, but it diminishes the veracity of some of the testimony and some of the advocates, both in and out of the legislature, when they claim that a person of 25 years old does not have the mental capacity to determine whether or not what they're doing is right on the issue of crime, and then they pass a bill that says that any child of any age, even 5 years old, 10 years old, can get a sex change surgery without even notifying their parents. So how does a child have the mental capacity to make that decision, but not the mental capacity to make the decision to commit a crime?
Well, that's conflating the issues. But what I want to focus on is the issue of competence, which is the actual issue that you're talking about. If you're at 26, you're not competent when you did the crime, basically. And competency from a forensic psychologist's position is individually evaluated, not group evaluated. And so you can have a 26-year-old who is quite competent, knew exactly what they're doing, and took $100,000 for the hit, versus one who shows a low IQ, who is easily persuaded, and doesn't understand what the implications are.
And that's up to a court to decide, because the court is going to bring in evidence on both sides and judge the veracity of that evidence and look into the competence of each person that's testifying. All we get to do is we sit there at a big panel and people come in and talk for 3 minutes and then they go. So, we don't, that's why it should not be a legislative thing.
We're agreeing here. And that's why I asked about the expertise of the advocates, especially the clinical ones, who would have said something like that.
That shouldn't be legislated. That should be in the law. That should be done in the court.
You usually get a mixture of experts with different opinions.
Yeah, but you do, but 26, we have data to show that adolescents are not fully formed, that moving into the early 20s, that's a lot grayer area. But 26, unless we're suffering from some kind of cognitive or neurological impairment due to trauma, then it's individually evaluated.
I think what Rep Dubitsky was saying is sometimes you'll hear from the same people that will argue that a 12 or 13-year-old can decide they need to change their sex.
At that point, their parents have to agree with that. They don't?
No, not in Connecticut.
No, in Connecticut, it's actually a crime for the doctor to notify the parents.
We do too. Thank you for coming. We agree with you. We agree with you. We totally agree with you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, sir.
You talked about a couple of bills that are working their way up to the governor's office. Some look like they're going to move right through.
Well, at the moment, every single bill is dead.
Okay.
So unless, anything that hasn't already passed and isn't already with the governor or been signed, I think the governor's deadline to sign is already passed.
All right.
So.
Next session, they'll all become, you might see the same kind of thing, but they'll all be a new number. It may have different language. Sometimes you learn things from the first time in committee meetings that you can see where they could be better. So you'll see them get better.
Take your moment.
Sometimes you never see them again.
So, go ahead.
Well, some of it just seems like common sense has been lost. If your 12-year-old kid comes up to you and says, "Dad, I want to be a pirate," and you pluck out my eye, the kid doesn't have enough common sense to make that type of decision. But you're telling, but this bill says he can go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, I want to be a pirate. Can you take out my eye or cut off my leg?"
No, you can't.
I mean,
But
if he says, "I want to be a girl," he can cut off his genitals.
If a 13-year-old girl in this state wants to get an abortion, she can get an abortion without her parents' knowledge or consent. And it could happen and the parents would never know. And she could come home, she could have complications, she could be depressed, she could become suicidal. And we've argued this over and over and over again, but we have, in one case, at 26, you're not developed enough. In the other case, at 12, 13, you're able to make these life-changing decisions, like sex change, taking hormones, having an abortion, that can affect you for the rest of your life.
But that's common in the society. At 18, you can go into the military, but you can't drink until 21, and you can't rent a car.
But those are very different. We're talking about things you can't change. Once you have a breast removal, you can't get them back. But once you give up a baby, an abortion, that's never going to change. So we're talking about some pretty big things here.
I introduced an amendment in the Judiciary Committee to ban sex change operations for children under 12 failed on a party line.
Under 12.
12.
And there are doctors in our state who believe it's very important if a child is confused that they start going through those changes pre-puberty. So they'll start with giving them hormones, starting to do some surgical.
Without their parents' knowledge.
Without their parents' knowledge. Are we good?
You guys have a thankless job.
Yes.
So thank you.
And I say